All right. Well, thank you, Raphael, for joining. First episode, so great to have you here as a first guest. Maybe to start, can you briefly introduce yourself and what you're doing at Clarity?
Yeah. So I'm Raphael Certain. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Clarity, which is a clinical stage neurotechnology company working on non-invasive neuromodulation technologies. And specifically, we use light and sound to restore the brain activity and develop treatments for patients with neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease.
hmm And yeah, was this always the plan, or how did you get started on Clarity?
So this company started for me 6 years ago. I was master's student at the Neurodegenerative Disease Institute in the southwest of France in Bordeaux, and I really wanted to work on this very exciting area, neurotechnology, AI, neuroscience. Everything was converging toward a very exciting area, and we could hear, progress being made by companies like Neuralink. It was really the early days, and so I really wanted to be part of that. And so I started to look for um, research that could be applied um, quite easily in the real world. And so research that was mature enough, promising, wouldn't have very high barriers to implementation, like implants. And so I started to work on brain oscillations and non-invasive brain stimulation methods. And I came across this field of gamma sensory stimulation that was showing exciting results in rodents in preclinical studies,
hmm
and was just waiting for being applied in humans. And so that's kind of how it started for us 6 years
Yeah.
ago, and then the company 4 years ago almost. So that's been a long
Yeah.
journey.
So it wasn't your field of expertise, I guess. It was really something you found and decided more as an entrepreneur to work on.
Yeah, I've always kind of been an entrepreneur.
hmm
At the same time, I was studying science, and so I was really looking for something that was promising enough, uh, researched enough, but also not yet on the market. Because as an entrepreneur, you want to actually have an edge and develop something that is not yet commercialized, so you can be among the first players and really have a strong differentiator. And so I started to work um, on the field of brain oscillations with different researchers, and on gamma sensory stimulation specifically, there were very few research published, but there were some strong papers published out of a team from the MIT in the US that was also starting to think about the product implementation of these treatments. And so I could really see an opportunity to develop a better product, a better implementation of the stimulation methods into a form factor that could really be accessible to patients from their home, really very scalable,
hmm
more personalized, more engaging, and something that could eventually really scale to different uh, neurological conditions. And so that's kind of how it started. And eventually the product vision took shape, and we started the company, and the vision grows, and the perspective also get a bit, you know, um, broader.
hmm
And so you start to build this as a company and not just as a
Yeah.
research project anymore.
Yeah. So gamma sensory stimulation is kind of the key term here, which is going to return a few times. So maybe good to start with what even is, yeah, gamma sensory stimulation. What happens in the brain when you stimulate gamma waves?
Um, Basically, the brain operates on molecular interactions and electrical interactions. And so for decades, the pharma industry has been really trying to modulate the molecular interactions by developing drugs that could uh, target very specific aspects of the brain and steps of these different mechanism of actions. Um, and in neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, that's mostly failed because drugs are very specific to targets and are not really generalized to the entire process of neurodegeneration, of neuroplasticity. And so, um, like around 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a few researchers started to study more specifically how we could modulate the brain activity with electrical stimuli, which could be implants, magnetic stimulation, electrical stimulation, or sensory stimulation with light and sound, non-invasive light and sound delivered through the eyes and the ears. And so that's kind of when we started to link our understanding of how we can modulate the brain activity and how the brain operates with different level of electrical activities, and that's what we call the frequency with delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma. Gamma being in the high ranges beyond 30 hertz, which we know are linked to memory and learning, highly demanding cognitive processes in general. And so what we observed is that in Alzheimer's disease patients, this activity was dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And so the hypothesis was that if we can restore this activity artificially by using non-invasive light and sound stimulation, maybe we could have an impact on disease progression. And so that's what those researchers started to explore in rodents, eventually showed that it was both restoring this activity and having an actual disease-modifying effect on the disease by reducing the accumulation of toxic proteins that we call amyloid beta plaques, and also inducing neuroplasticity in key areas. And so that really motivated the translation then to humans and to different clinical studies from different groups and from our company as well at the moment. And so the objective is to be able to commercialize this as a proper treatment by delivering this gamma stimulation at 40 hertz, which seems to be a very important frequency. It's still quite unclear why 40 hertz is very important, but there are like very strong clinical proof points showing the benefits of these stimulation methodologies for the treatment of Alzheimer's, but also for other indications that are still to be fully demonstrated. Yeah.
So Alzheimer's, like you said, it's a disease of protein accumulation, which degenerates functions. But these gamma waves that are distorted, is that a symptom, or is that how do you see that? Is that something that's the problem, or is that causing the problems in the brain?
So we know that there is specific population of neurons that really modulate a process that we call the lymphatic activity, which is in charge of eliminating some of the toxic proteins that we mentioned before. And we observe this correlation between a reduction in gamma brain waves and a reduction in the lymphatic activity. And so if we could induce gamma activity, we could also modulate the lymphatic system. And that's it's a very interesting process, because when you stimulate gamma activity, you actually increase the vascular activity as well, which increases the exchanges between the CSF fluid and the brain, and that's stimulating the lymphatic system that eventually eliminates the accumulation of toxic proteins. And the other side of this process is that gamma activity is also boosting neuroplasticity. And so you have this double effect of reducing the negative aspect of neurodegeneration and boosting the growth of new connections and new dendrites, which eventually maintains cognitive functions like memory, daily living abilities in patients, and so on. So the goal is to maintain patients at home longer with a process that is non-invasive, safe, and quite easily that we can quite easily integrate in form factor that can be used every day from the patient's home.
So if I see it correctly, it's like the engine in your brain is kind of shutting down, and it's kind of sparking it back up for those neuroprotective effects, neuroplasticity effects. But you're not stopping the disease, right? That's not possible just yet.
No, you don't stop it. You slow it down, and the data so far showing between 69 to 77% slowdown on of the disease progression on different endpoints like MMSE, brain atrophy with world brain volume measured with fMRI, and daily living ability. So those are key endpoints and gold standard endpoints that you use in clinical trials to assess the effect of the treatment. We don't expect a full reversal of the degeneration in patients. We might get there if we combine our approach to other treatments that have different targets. And specifically in Alzheimer's, something that is interesting is that you have almost 3 different therapeutic layers that you could think about. The first one is the monoclonal antibodies that have been approved in the past 2 years from companies like Eli Lilly and SI, which are really targeting the accumulation of amyloid beta proteins, which is also challenged in many ways and by different key opinion leaders, because it's also not now really being considered the main reason why Alzheimer's is developed. Like amyloid beta proteins are essentially just a result of other processes. But if you can target them early enough, you can expect to have a significant impact from a clinical point of view. And so then you have another layer of treatment that is targeting the phosphorylation of the tau protein, which is another protein that is very important in cognition and that is impaired in Alzheimer's disease. And the last layer is the one we are targeting, which is a more system level intervention, which is really aiming to restore the entire network connectivity and to synchronize brain regions to then trigger back this activity at gamma frequencies more broadly. And so if you combine those two treatment layers, potentially we could get to 100% slowdown of the disease. So basically stabilizing fully the disease progression. I don't think would be able to reverse the process, because that would mean we need to trigger the growth of new neurons. And that would not really be possible with those type of treatments. But eventually, if we had like gene therapy or other type of treatments, we could potentially reverse entirely the disease.
Yeah. Yeah, exciting. And so your approach, from what is known already and from what you can share, is auditory visual, and there's also an aspect of VR to it. Can you share a little bit more about what that product is going to be like, and maybe especially how you turn something what to us seems as quite simple, audio and sound and visuals, into something that can actually modulate activity in the brain?
Yeah. So basically, the core ingredient here is using light and sound flickers at 40 hertz. It's 40 stimulation per second. And if you just use that to entrain the brain activity, you need to look at it for like around an hour per day to get to the effect I described before, the 69-77%, as it has been shown in a clinical study published by a team led by Li Wetzai. And the thing is that those methods are really rudimentary. Like you really need to pay attention to it for 60 minutes, which is a pretty annoying process. It's quite uncomfortable for the patient. So lots of patients will probably fall asleep.
Yeah, you're sitting, looking at a screen every day at 9 a.m., for example.
It's not even a screen. It's LEDs. So it's like flashing lights and sounds. So it's not the best experience you could imagine. And so what we started from a few years ago, and 6 years ago actually, is that, okay, we know this light and sound stimulation can induce effects. Now the question is, can we embed this into a product that could be used by millions of people every day for at least 30 minutes? And so we instead of using LEDs, we started to use display technologies to deliver stimulation and combine the stimulation with different type of contents, which can be different type of videos or cognitive training, and basically content people would already enjoy watching every day. And elderly people are spending already a few hours per day watching TV, and so our assumption was, if we can embed those stimulations into more naturalistic experiences and things that they're already enjoying, we will be able to engage them more in the experience and eventually get more out of the therapeutic benefits. And so that's what we've started to build on. And eventually we, instead of just using display technology, which had different technical challenges associated to it, we switched to using immersive technologies like VR to really provide a fully controlled experience, both from a stimulation delivery point of view, but also from a user experience point of view. And so by doing that, you control every single parameter of your experience and of your therapeutic method, from the stimulation parameters to the experience you deliver, to the closed loop and the interactivity around the experience, and so on. So it's really a fully home-based neuromodulation platform that both stimulate and record the activity of the patient while they are interacting with it, and can adapt the treatment all the time based on what they prefer, what they interact the best with, and also how the brain reacts to the treatment parameters specifically.
Right. So I already hear you say adapting stimulations. So there's also a read component. I assume you want to move towards a closed loop form factor. What does that look like? Is there EEGs in your headset, or how are you measuring this and adapting it?
Yeah, you can. So there are different levels of closed loop. It's either you close the loop on the brain activity itself, which can be electrical activity or other type of um, signals you can measure. But you can also close the loop on the engagement layer. So based on how the patient reacts to the stimulation, the macro signals from the face or the gaze. So you measure all of that, and eventually you have the more data types as possible, like to really be multimodal and very complete in your analysis. And the more data you have, the more different type of data you have, and the more precise you can be in your delivery process. And so for us, it really means measuring all the micro signals from the gaze, from the voice that we record, and all the interactivity is done with voice interaction, for instance. And so it's very natural for the patient as well. It is the process, and it is the implementation of the device in their home. Um, and you can also then use EEG to measure how the patient's brain react to the different stimulation parameters, and eventually use that as biomarkers for long-term progress
Yeah.
assessment.
Yeah.
So you can have like real-time closed loop, and also uh, um, not real-time closed loop for like longer
Yeah.
term
Longitudinal.
processes that
Yeah.
are happening due to the stimulation. Yeah.
Right. Um, Obviously it's non-invasive, but to your patient population, which is mostly elderly, it's maybe a different type of invasive to have to deal with this technology. So do you already experiment with this, like how to make it accessible to this patient population?
Mm. So it's a very good point, and you have to think about all the different
Right.
steps of the delivery, not just the treatment. It's because you can build or develop the best treatment possible from a scientific standpoint, but which then results in a very complicated user experience. So you gotta compromise a bit of both and really know what you want to prioritize. So it's also one of the exciting aspect of what we are building, and our day to day is really about this. Is like, okay, how can we optimize the treatment delivery, but at the same time also optimize for adherence and engagement in the long term. Um, and so we are running very fast iteration cycles where we can iterate on both things. And so far, our observations are that actually patients with Alzheimer's are reacting even better to using these technologies than um, healthy elders.
Mhm.
Um, it's difficult to know why, but I think it's because they are. It's a very exciting experience. It's very emotional. It makes them see something they are not used to be exposed to, and those people most of the time they also lack social stimuli, and so it engages them in a new experience. And so if you design it in a way it's simple enough so they can use it autonomously, for instance, not having any controllers or not having a very complex dashboard, and pre-selecting the experiences they are going to watch every day based on what they prefer, and some personal inputs that we can collect,
Mhm.
it's going to keep them engaged in the long run. And so then you also need to think about the design of the surrounding experience, the hardware, charging, notification push to remember them that they have to do their stimulation session. Because obviously this habit creation is also a challenge in people with Alzheimer's. It's very difficult to learn new things. It's much easier to remember old things because it's different type of memory that is not impacted in the same way by the disease progression.
Yeah.
So you got to think about the experience even more than with normal users, if I may say it like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's exciting for us, and it's also it's challenging because you gotta make people with very different perspectives and background work together on these products, and so you kind of have this push coming from science and the push coming from product, and so you gotta find a middle ground and also not compromise on the end experience, because
Yeah,
that's the most
yeah,
important thing, is like that people are gonna use it long enough so they can benefit from it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I see that. Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible disease, and it really impacts your agency and a lot of your behavior. So I guess it's not something you can just assume is gonna happen because it's a good product, right? You really have to design around it.
Yeah, you have to design around it, and also not just take the patient in count, because Alzheimer's specifically, we design our product as a platform for different indications, but in Alzheimer's, the user is not just the patient; it's also the caregivers, the family members,
Yeah, yeah.
the healthcare practitioners. So you got to think about them as well while you design a product, because they will be involved in maintaining the patients engaged in the experience. So you know what kind of data you need to collect to send to who at what point in the user journey, and you also need to think about how can you engage the family members,
Mhm.
so they can be the cheerleaders for the patients. And so
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you get them on board, then you it's a big win. So yeah, you can design the product with them as well, which is pretty helpful.
Do you see this as like a primary treatment modality that's really like coordinated with a clinician, or is this more something that someone has on the side to just, get as many benefits as possible, like a session where they can? Yeah.
Yeah, we see this as a home-based brain clinic, basically,
Yeah.
where you can both deliver treatment and measure patients' progress and patients' activity, and use that to inform medical guidance from
Mhm.
healthcare practitioners. And so the more, because it's very difficult to collect longitudinal data in this patient population, and so neurologists most of the time they have to make decisions based on single data points, or just MRI, fMRI scans, or
Yeah.
PET scans. So it's these are like just very deterministic data points that can evolve over time and that are not always very reliable. And so if you can collect data on a daily basis that you provide to practitioners in a very intelligible way that doesn't disrupt their workflow, but just is integrated into their uh, daily workflow and dashboards, then
Mhm.
you can actually help them to make better decisions and spend less time with patients, or at least feel more comfortable recommending um, treatment A or treatment B to this patient. And we don't position ourselves either as a direct, substitute to pharmaceutical treatments. I think, as I explained before, they are gonna um, act on very different targets
Yeah.
and will be
Yeah.
quite complementary to each other. And so we should really think about Alzheimer's as a multi-factor disease with different treatments at different stages that will interact together and that we should coordinate. And so we see ourselves as this coordination platform that can also
Mhm.
deliver an intervention that other pharmaceutical companies cannot necessarily provide.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And I saw that last year you published your first study on this, first peer reviewed study. What did you study, and what were the first results?
So that was a safety, feasibility, and
Uh-huh.
um, durability study. So we basically wanted to demonstrate the feasibility of delivering 40 hertz light and sound stimulation through immersive environments in VR. And so integrating stimulation in different type of experiences, from videos, cognitive training, and things that could be a bit more engaging for patients. We wanted to show that this was not impacting the quality of the stimulation we deliver and the level of neural entrainment induced.
Mhm.
So that was one of the first outcome from the study. It wasn't impacted, so that was great for us. And the second aspect was obviously the safety side effects. Didn't observe any significant adverse events in the study, both in healthy elders and Alzheimer's patients. But the last element, which was pretty exciting, is that we could also observe acute improvement in memory performance in patients which undergone the stimulation within these immersive environments versus just normal immersive environment without stimulation. So this was basically making the point that we were inducing activity in brain areas that are relevant to memory functions. And that's particularly important in Alzheimer's because the more targeted you are and the more impact you will have on the disease progression. And so if you, instead of just hammering the brain with light and sound flickers at 40 hertz, you can actually guide the stimulation, the activity you induce in the right brain areas. So it's a dosage question. If you can do that, you are more precise, you are more targeted, you can really control the delivery location, and so you can reduce potentially the time you have to spend in this stimulation to get the most out of it. And so that's really our stronger differentiator and stronger moat is the understanding of how do you induce the activity in these regions and what kind of immersive experience you deliver to achieve that. And so the user experience is not just random content, it's content that is modified and designed in a way that can actually induce the activity in the right areas.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't notice before, to be honest. So it's not just a hardware challenge; it's also a content challenge in a sense. What kind of content could I imagine? Like, what kind of, if you can share anything so far?
Um, yeah, the extent of what I can share at this point is still quite limited, but you could, I'm just thinking what I can share that has been published. Um, what I can say is, for instance, you can design um, something similar to a cognitive task that will tap into specific cognitive domains, like let's say associative memory, processing speed, and you will design this task in a way you can embed the stimulation in it by respecting your framework of parameters. And so we've defined what are the right parameters by doing a lot of in-house R&D and iteration around those. And then we've designed different type of task and engagement strategies so we can embed them in those and deliver this in a non-disruptive way to patients. We will release a bit more details on these experiences probably before the end of this year. But it's really what differentiates us from others that we don't just use flickers. We actually design a very specific methodology that combine those two things together and actually make it a new methodology that is not just gamma sensory stimulation. And so then you can adapt that to different symptoms, different diseases, different use cases, and you make it really scalable. And it's like if you were, teleguiding stimulation in specific part of the brain without having to do any surgery or putting any implants, while people are actually doing something they enjoy doing. So it's quite powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, you're not the only one doing this, right? I think in the U.S. there is Cognito Therapeutics. They're doing also gamma stimulation, and beyond it being interesting to talk about, what others are doing, I think it's quite interesting to see that this year they've managed to raise a lot of money. I think over $100 million, which also raised some question marks in my network, at least, about why is this much money going into something that doesn't seem nearly as complex as invasive BCIs, for example. How do you see the market moving, and like, do you see it as like the market wakes up to this opportunity, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's less a matter of uh, complexity of the approach rather than the potential outcomes. What the Cogniros team and the group at the MIT have been able to show so far is super exciting. Because also it seems like a simple approach because it looks like just flashing light and sound at 40 hertz, which seems easily replicable. But the details of the parameters used to deliver the stimulation in the right way, involving the right sensory areas and the right sensory system, and translating this external uh, energy into the right signals in the brain is actually much more complex than it looks like. So what they have been able to achieve is really is really material, and the reason they have been able to raise so much money is because the results obtained in efficacy studies are beyond almost anything we've seen so far in human subjects.
Yeah.
So the potential, if that's translated into phase 3 efficacy results, which we expect to see from them in August this year, is going to be monumental. And the market for Alzheimer's is probably one of the largest healthcare market.
Yeah.
In the US, there are 6 million patients with Alzheimer's, and there are over 10 million patients with mild cognitive impairments, which are earlier stages than Alzheimer's. And so it's a very large pool of patients that could benefit from these early interventions. And Alzheimer's is not the only potential indications that this can actually improve. And so, but our perspective on this is that gamma sensory stimulation with light and sound is just the first step of a broader ecosystem of product that can actually modulate the brain in a much more non-invasive manner and engaging manner. And so we really differentiate by adding this engagement layer with the content, which will help us to design very specific and personalized treatment to patients, for patients that have Alzheimer's and other indications, but also collect very unique data points of patients that are exposed to those type of treatments. And those data will not only help us to improve treatment delivery, but also help us to connect our ecosystem to other products like implants, drugs, monitoring tools in the patient's homes, and so on. And so we will be able to be this go-to platform that can coordinate the healthcare journey of patients with Alzheimer's and other indications. And so in our case, it goes way beyond gamma sensory stimulation. And stimulations, and the treatment part is just the first step to bring this platform to every patient's homes and eventually to millions of healthy individuals who just want to maintain their cognition all the time with aging. And so I'm very excited about what's happening right now in this ecosystem, because there are very few companies that have actually taken this clinical validation path properly and try to develop products in the right way to make them FDA approved and eventually reimbursed as well. And if we want to give the scale it deserves, we need to do this properly. We need to aim for reimbursement. We need to aim for a very broad adoption, and we need to make it recognized as a proper treatment methodology and not just as a wellness device, as most of those solutions so far have been considered as.
Yeah. So still a lot on the roadmap. You're 5 years in now, and what does the next 5 years look like? Is it 5 years since you started?
The company was formed late 22, so it's going to be 4 years very soon. We've so far, validated the clinical approach, developed the first versions of the product, also built an ecosystem of partners globally who can do research with us, clinical validation, and provide access to patients. The next 5 years is 5 years is a lot. I don't know exactly where we're going to be in 5 years. I have a few ideas, but it's already going to be a lot happening in the next 2 years. And we aim to be commercialized definitely within the next 2 years, at least in the US, and then expand to other markets. Our company has been both in Europe and the US since day one, with presence in San Francisco and Paris. And so we have this understanding of both markets. And so that's also an advantage that we have, is that we could commercialize in parallel those two geographies. But it's important for us to really focus on the very next steps that involve demonstrating the efficacy of this method in a large enough pool of patients that the FDA is going to recognize. And so the Cognitos data are going to help, but we need to do our clinical studies. And so that's what we're going to be focused on for the next 18 months, is to bring our platform to home-based efficacy trials in patients in the US in Alzheimer's. And we also start to expand the platform to other indications like multiple sclerosis, which is also pretty exciting because it shows the potential of helping a broader pool of patients than what we thought when we started.
Mhm.
But you cannot spread yourself too thin and go
Yeah.
after too many, diseases at the same time. So we are also gonna have to raise much more money than what we've raised so far. Um, and that's gonna be a big uh, part of our time for the next few months.
Yeah, exciting, exciting. Maybe lastly on that regulatory strategy, are you what is the strategy there? Is there any product in the market where you can compare yourself to? Is this like a PMA pathway?
It's not a PMA per se. It's so at, as of today, it's a de novo.
Yeah.
Um, in At the time we will be filing for FDA approval, it's likely going to be a 510(k)
Yeah, yeah.
because of Comilos and potentially other players. Sometimes companies are creative with the predicate devices they are using, which don't necessarily need to have the exact same form factor. And so I know neuromodulation companies can use, like a TSCS company can use a TDCS device or things like
Mhm.
that. So it already happened in the past. So I don't know where the FDA stand regarding this type of predicate uh, comparables, but for sure, in our case, we will try to be as close as possible to gamma sensory stimulation devices. Um, and then that's going to depend on where the industry is at in 18 to 24 months. So we'll have to see. But for
Yeah.
sure, we assume it's going to be a de novo, and we walk um, from this hypothesis.
Right. Great. Big ambitions, big use case, a lot of value. So what is the big update that we need to look forward to this year?
Well, in a couple of weeks, we'll release the second part of our data
Mhm.
from the study we discussed together. Um, we have a study starting in multiple sclerosis. We will have a couple other ones in Alzheimer's that we launch this year in Europe and the US, North America. Um, and I would say, yeah, let's just keep an eye on the results from these studies and first, I would say, more public release of our products as well. It's not going to be commercialized before we complete the efficacy trials, but we will share a bit more about our products in the next couple of months. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about the demos we'll be able to show. And that's
Great.
something we've been able to do so far, and we have a lot to show. So excited
Yeah.
about this.
We'll make sure
Yeah.
to cover it here also on Neurofounders because I'm very curious now to see
Yeah.
what's behind the scenes. So yeah, exciting.
And maybe if I can also share what I don't know who is going to listen to this, but we'll also hire new team members in the Bay Area in in the next few months.
There you go.
So if anyone is interested about this, the platform we described and what we are working on, yeah, I would really be happy to connect with them and to see what we can do together.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you very much for coming on and also well being the first guest of this new series. I think these conversations are fascinating and really give you an insight that is just hard to read in an article because yeah, I mean it seems simple on paper, but there's so much behind the scenes going on. So thank you very much and appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Dominic.
All
I
right.
appreciate it.